else has anything to add on that? Or
perhaps just a moment on this. So maybe I'll just draw a connection to, we've talked, I think, about a kind of broader set of toolkits and accountabilities across the system. And so Global Affairs, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Foreign Affairs have a set of tools where they can engage at the diplomatic level with representatives from other countries if in fact that they're doing things which are beyond the conventions about how diplomats should behave when they're in the country. And I think in the matter of Foreign Affairs, PRC efforts to interfere in processes or do other things which are under the broad rubric of hostile acts by state actors, we saw once kind of there was a reset of the relationship between Canada and China after the return of the two Michaels. So I'd be talking about kind of late fall 21, early 2022. There was a series of both diplomatic notes and démarches, so meetings that would have taken place between the Deputy Minister and the Minister with their counterparts in the People's Republic of China to raise these concerns about activity. So this particular decision is in the context of quite a number of other steps that would have been taken by the Minister and by the Deputy Minister.
Thank you. I think we can leave the PNGing of Mr. Wei for now and move to another instance. So for this one, Mr. or Ms. Registrar, I'll ask you to pull up WIT 151 and scroll down to paragraph 84. This topic, again, is for you, Ms. Thomas. It's the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. So we understand, and the discussion is at this point in your witness summary, so you can refer to it, but that you were intimately involved in the discussions that were happening between Canada and India following this. So can you help us with how did this unfold from your perspective?
Well, as I think you're well aware, Mr. Nijjar was murdered in June 2023, and it was the second high-profile murder in that same Gurdwara. Mr. Malik had occurred almost exactly a year before. The immediate intelligence and police response hypothesis was that it was a retaliation, but the community was raising concern. Very good intelligence and policing work through very good intelligence and policing work, we learned that there was a high probability that, in fact, this was an extrajudicial killing. We learned that in late July when we received the intelligence from CSIS, and it was collaborated and corroborated by other documents and products. I briefed the clerk of the Privy Council within an hour of receiving it with CSIS. The clerk organized for the Prime Minister to come and read this intelligence, and we had a conversation about what our next steps would be. Throughout this entire process, our priority was protecting the police investigation. There had been a murder in Canada, and it was critical that the police were able to conduct their investigation without the public being aware. So preserving the investigation was critical.
Yes,
I had a coincidental.
And we are Hamas.
There's nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas.
Samadoun, a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel advocacy group.
These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine and fighting for its liberation.
That's Samadoun co-founder and international coordinator Charlotte Cates. Samadoun, which means steadfast in Arabic, is banned in Germany and Israel for its vocal support of designated terror groups.
Most of what we do is kind of the activism that you see people do every day in their communities.
We stand with the Palestinian resistance and their heroic and brave action on October 7th. And they said, long live October 7th.
Without warning, violence and chaos erupts in the Middle East.
Okay, so basically, we're waiting for question period to begin. So this is a video that was posted on Polyev's channel, and more or less, this is a group that resides in Canada, somewhere probably in Vancouver. They have no issues saying these things out in public. And now Poilievre and many people want this pro-terror group gone from Canada. This is the leader. This is the founder right here. Play this intro again just so you guys can get a little more invested into this, shall I say.
And yes,
Because just a few days ago, this group was chanting death to Canada and burning the Canadian flag just freely, just openly. And as much as I am an advocate for free speech, and I care about free speech a lot, when you are in the country, in Canada, you reside in this country, and you are chanting death to Canada and burning the flag, I'm sorry, you do not deserve to be here. It is simple as that.
and yes, we are Hezbollah and we are Hamas.
And they are so open.
Wrong with
They are so open about it.
Hamas.
Samadoun, a
There's nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas.
Samadoun, a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel advocacy group.
These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine and fighting for its liberation.
That's Samadoun co-founder and international coordinator Charlotte Cates. Samadoun, which means steadfast in Arabic, is banned in Germany and Israel for its vocal support of designated terror groups.
Most of what we do is kind of the activism that you see people do every day in their communities.
We stand with the Palestinian resistance and their heroic and brave action on October 7th. And they said, long live October 7th.
Without warning, violence and chaos erupts in the Middle East. The Palestinian militant group Hamas striking Israel with thousands of rockets and sending groups of gunmen across the border.
Israel burn, burn. Palestinians will return.
So this is what we're dealing with now. This is how far it's gone.
Israel burn, burn.
And like just openly, they chant death to Canada. They burn the Canadian flag. Why are they here? That's all I gotta ask. It's pretty insane when you start truly looking into it. You guys are just joining now. This is footage from a day or a couple days ago. Pro-Palestine supporters, protesters, whatever the hell you want to call them, just openly burning the Canadian flag. Let's get back to whatever was going on here.
Are not there. We're talking about how the actor is dangerous, how they proceeded by coming into contact with certain individuals, but those individuals are not named because what we're interested in is the pattern that's being used by the foreign actor. And so here it was a question of coming up with incidents. So first of all, we had to define what exactly would be an incident. And the conclusion that we came to be able to respond to this request was an incident. It would take proof that there was foreign interference. So this had to be something that was secret, that was false, and that was threatening. And there had to be an impact also. And this had to be at a certain given time. And so that's why it was somewhat difficult. And as I was saying, it's because CSIS is not really looking at incidents. They have a different point of view with respect to foreign interference. So my contribution with respect to this document it was especially when I had the first versions, when I was concerned because it was presented not with respect to something that happened, things that happened to a certain MPs, and I thought it gave the idea that foreign interference and the responsibility was something that lays with the MPs. I thought that was unfair because the actors of foreign interference, those are foreign countries, but sometimes we may have MPs who have some behaviors that are inappropriate, who may be not prudent enough, who may not be writing the but really the things need to be really placed. The responsibilities are really with the foreign actors. So we had to reorganize the presentation of the document so that it would be seen by foreign, seen as responsible, being the responsible actors being the foreign actors and not the MPs. Question.
The foreign states who really are the threat actors. And another thing you mentioned is around the table, essentially. I think we've also talked about differing views on what would or would not constitute foreign interference. And we've heard from Mr. Morrison a little bit and Mr. Vigneault about how that was part of the discussion around the table again. That picks up on something I think that Mr. Hannaford, you were explaining before, which is that there are different, and Ms. Charette as well, I think, there are differing perspectives on this perhaps within government, depending on what lens is being used or what perspective is being brought. So I'm wondering if you can help us sort of understand those discussions as well and where they're at and where they come from. And I think one of the questions I may have asked in a previous meeting is whether this is a bug in the system or a feature in the system. So I'm not sure who wants to start with that. I'm sure you all have things to say. Here we go.
I'll certainly invite that. I'll start, though. I think it's absolutely clear that it is a feature of the system that we have different perspectives that are brought to bear on assessing the information that's available to us. You know, as Ms. Charette was saying, those of us who've been posted abroad, part of our role is to have a good detailed knowledge of how decisions are made in the host country that we are dealing with and how those decisions can benefit Canada. And that involves, in many instances, things like creating lists. And so the creation of a list per se is kind of a classic exercise of what we do when we are abroad, and it's a perfectly legitimate exercise. How those lists are used and the sort of the manner in which
it's been months now since the Auditor General revealed a $400 million It's been months now since the Auditor General revealed a $400 million spending scandal involving 186 incidences of conflict of interest where Liberal appointees gave tax dollars to their own companies. $400 million is a lot of money for the single moms who can't afford groceries, the seniors who can't afford rent. We're not just going to let $400 million of corruption be swept under the rug so Justin Trudeau can get on with his day. So we say, let's end this now. Let's get Parliament back to work by handing over the documents to the police so we can bring fair à la Chambre.
Bonjour tout le monde. Comme vous le savez, le Parlement est paralysé aujourd'hui, encore à cause de la camouflage de Justin Trudeau et les libéraux.
It's too bad he made this entire speech in French. I don't know why he did it like this, but he goes on to talk about the terror group that is currently just openly burning the flag, chanting death to Canada.
Le jugement du président de la Chambre et en conséquence, le travail du Parlement est paralysé. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a dans les documents qui est aussi mauvais que le Premier ministre a peur de partager les preuves avec les policiers? Ça montre encore qu'après 9 ans, Justin Trudeau et le Bloc libéral n'en valent pas le coût, le crime et la corruption. Après 9 ans de Justin Trudeau, le coût de logement a doublé. La nourriture a gonflé en prix forçant 2 millions de personnes aux banques alimentaires. Il y a des maladies liées à la manque de nourriture qui font un retour à cause de cette inflation. Le coût de logement a doublé nationalement. À Montréal, ça a triplé. Triplé, c'est incroyable de voir combien ça coûte cher après 9 ans de la bureaucratie que Justin Trudeau a financée, qui bloque la construction de logements, l'impression d'argent qui gonfle le coût de tout, un système d'immigration que Justin Trudeau a brisé après que c'était auparavant le meilleur système au monde. Et maintenant, on voit aussi la division que M. Trudeau a causée avec sa rhétorique, sa style politique, la division qu'il fait entre groupes, sa manque de sécurité à nos frontières. On voit ça surtout avec l'antisémitisme et la violence dirigée vers notre communauté juive. Il faut remarquer que ça c'est de nouveau au Canada. Évidemment, il y a toujours eu, malheureusement, l'antisémitisme, mais pas à si nouveau. On n'a pas eu des synagogues allumées en feu. La violence et les appels à la génocide devant les maisons, les hôpitaux, les entreprises juives auparavant. On peut blâmer, si on veut, le 7 octobre. Mais on a toujours eu des conflits en Moyen-Orient. En 1967, il y a eu une guerre. En 1973, la guerre de Yom Kippour. Il y a eu 2 intifadas, la guerre entre Hezbollah et Israël en 2008. Pas de violence dans nos rues, pas de synagogues attaquées. Ça, c'est de nouveau. En fait, les crimes de la haine avaient augmenté de plus de 100% avant le 7 octobre. C'est à cause de l'approche qui divise avec une idéologie extrême imposée de ce gouvernement qu'on est dans cette place. On a vu hier encore une autre manifestation de ça. Des groupes sur la terre, ici au Canada, qui font des déclarations haineuses, qui revendiquent qu'Israël soit effacé de la carte. Des citations que j'ai fait à la Chambre, j'ai répété à la Chambre des communes pour chercher une condamnation de notre ministre des Affaires étrangères et a refusé de les condamner. Et je revendique que Mme la ministre Joly s'excuse pour avoir refusé de dénoncer des propos génocidaires et haineux.
If you are caught in public burning the Canadian flag while living in Canada, you should be charged. No questions, no ifs, ands, or buts, especially while chanting death to Canada. I actually can't believe the government is not doing anything about this. Not a single thing. They can denounce it all they want. They could say it's bad and it shouldn't be done. But they're not taking any steps or necessary actions to really do something against this. Specifically the Liberals.
Aujourd'hui. Le groupe Samidoun, c'est un organisme qui est un front pour le Front populaire de la libération de Palestine, qui est un groupe déjà banni au Canada. Au Canada, on a une loi antiterroriste qui exige que si un groupe agit au nom ou pour le bénéfice d'un autre groupe terroriste, ce deuxième groupe doit être banni. C'est selon la section 83 de la Code criminel. J'ai la preuve ici que Samidoun fait exactement ça. Le fondateur de Samidoun, Khaled Barakat, a été décrit par le gouvernement israélien comme un membre haut placé du FPLP, un groupe banni au Canada. Le FPLP est placé sur la liste des entités terroristes en vertu du Code criminel du pays depuis 2003. En février 2021, le ministre israélien de la Défense nationale a désigné Samidoun comme étant un organisme terroriste et une filiale du FPLP. Et en 2023, l'Allemagne a également interdit Samidoun, déclarant qu'il servait de réseau international qui diffuse de la propagande anti-israélienne et anti-juive et qu'il soutenait et glorifiait diverses organisations terroristes étrangères, y compris le Hamas. Les dirigeants de Samidoun ont été expulsés d'Allemagne en 2019 et se sont vus refuser l'entrée dans l'Union européenne en 2022, avant d'être renvoyés au Canada, où ils étaient évidemment invités de venir. En 2019, PayPal, DonorBlocks et Plaid ont fermé les dons en ligne à Samidoun en raison de ses liens présumés avec le FPLP à la suite d'un incident survenu en 2016, au cours duquel le FPLP a fait une déclaration officielle de gratitude à Samidoun pour son soutien aux prisonniers du FPLP. Donc, finalement, la chef du Samidoun ici au Canada a dit que les attaques de 7 octobre étaient des courageuses et héroïques. Hier, on a vu Samidoun brûler le drapeau canadien et a prononcé mort au Canada, mort aux États-Unis et mort à l'Israël. Ces propos ne sont pas criminels. C'est clair. C'est pas criminel de dire des choses comme ça, mais ces liens avec un autre organisme qui est banni, ça c'est criminel, selon le Code criminel, section 83. Donc, nous revendiquons que le gouvernement
Okay, so I want to play that video again from earlier. This is a video on Poilievre's channel showing you exactly what he's talking about when it comes to this pro-terror group in Canada.
And yes, we are Hezbollah and we are Hamas.
There's nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas.
Samidoun, a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel advocacy group.
These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine and fighting for its liberation.
That's Samidoun co-founder and international coordinator Charlotte Kate. Samidoun, which means steadfast in Arabic, is banned in Germany and Israel for its vocal support of designated terror groups.
Most of what we do is kind of the activism that you see people do every day in their communities.
We stand with the Palestinian resistance and their heroic and brave action on October 7th. And they said, long live October 7th!
Okay, so you basically get the gist of it here. Apparently Jagmeet is going to be doing some questions with reporters. So, kind of interested to see what he has to say. And what lies and bullshit he is going to come up with on the spot here. So, let's take a look at that. Question period will be coming up very soon. So stick around, because I've got a solid feeling today's question period is going to be a heated one. I do believe the leaders of all parties are going to be coming out swinging for the fences today based on everything that's going on. That group that is going around yelling death to Canada while burning the Canadian flag. We also have this massive Trudeau scandal going on. And here's the leader of the Green Party. I mean, nobody really cares what she has to say. I guess CPAC doesn't even care what she has to say. They cut her right off. We will see if Jagmeet will be showing up to answer questions soon. I don't know entirely what is going on here. But if you are new to the channel, you are new to the stream here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. Make sure you hit the notification bell as well. People forget that all the time. It is all good, though. Last night, there was actually a debate for the, the premiers of British Columbia. They had a pretty lengthy debate last night, and I don't really follow too much of the provincial stuff when it comes down to it. At the end of the day, I don't know much of anything of the BC leaders, but they did have, like I said, a very lengthy debate last night talking about all of the issues that British Columbians are facing. I find it funny that the Green Party actually kind of has a position there. They showed up to the debate last night. It's a heavy NDP conservative area, I guess, and the Green Party has some sort of say. Their leader or whoever showed up to the debate last night. I thought that was kind of funny. I'm actually trying to look for the debate from last night. We can watch a bit of that while we wait for whatever to show up first. Here we go.
You'll also have the opportunity to engage with one another during periods of open debate. And just before we begin, a few words from me to you. Please remember your audience this evening. It is the people of British Columbia, many of whom are engaging for the first time tonight by watching and listening to you. Let's give them a vigorous but respectful debate, one that everyone can hear and understand. The questions have been designed to challenge you and bring out the best responses you have. So please answer them. Okay, ready to debate? Ready. Okay, so.
Statements by members, déclaration de députés. The honourable member from Don Valley.
All right, we were just watching the BC debate from last night for like 2 whole seconds, but here we go, question period.
Initiative led by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the Canadian Electrical Contractors Association, the National Electrical Trades Council, and other industry groups. This day is dedicated to raising awareness about the dangers of electric shock injuries, which can have long-term health effects with no cure. Proper awareness and safe work practices are essential to preventing these injuries and ensuring the safety of tradespeople. Key safety practices
Might have to go back and cover that BC debate. I might watch it later tonight or something. We'll see.
Testing for absence of voltage, and using lockout, tagout protocols. I want to thank the organizations behind the Electrical Injury Day of Recognition for their ongoing commitment to promoting health and safety in the industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Simcoe Grey.
Mr. Speaker, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the Small Halls Festival, a unique 8-week festival with events across the communities of Clearview Township. Community centres, outdoor stages, and churches in Creemore, Singhampton, Duntroon, Nottawa, Sunnydale Corners, Brentwood, Dunedin, and Stayner will each host different events. Whether it's whiskey or wine tasting, beer or food pairing, chicken races, craft fairs, car shows, a do-it-yourself marble run competition, or music or art shows of any styles and varieties. There really is something for everyone at the Small Halls Festivals. Congratulations to Mayor Doug Measures, Deputy Mayor Paul Van Stavern, Clearview Township Council, and the more than 250 community volunteers and sponsors who make the festival possible. Come to Clearview Township to celebrate the best of rural living and see why this award-winning festival is one of the greatest in Ontario.
The honourable member from Hamilton Mountain.
Speaker, Women's History Month gives us an opportunity to celebrate the achievements of Canadian women. And since this year's theme is about women at work, I want to highlight the integral role that women play in shaping our economy. I regularly meet with women entrepreneurs in my riding of Hamilton Mountain, like Bridget Soares of Apostrophe Accounting, Julie Bobiak of the Lucaya Cafe, Julie DiNardo of Gleam Smile Center, and the Montague sisters, who founded Black Owned, which helps uplift and promote other local businesses. And because of these conversations, I know how important this government's initiatives have been. Our national childcare strategy has helped more women enter the workforce than ever before. Our women's entrepreneurship strategy is providing loans and investments and a critical knowledge hub. And I believe measures like these are due to the fact we have gender parity in cabinet and Canada's first ever woman finance minister. So while Conservatives just keep hurling meaningless slogans on this side of the House, we're actually getting things done.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. It's legitimate to demonstrate for peace in the Middle East and to be distressed by the number of civilian casualties. But to demonstrate on October 7th, shouting, "We are Hamas, we are Hezbollah," or "Death to Canada," as we saw in Vancouver, is despicable, Mr. Speaker. And it echoes the excesses we're also
It is beyond despicable. Come on.
condemns this type of language. There's a difference, an ocean, in fact, between freedom of expression and claiming responsibility for recognized terrorist entities. There's an ocean between wanting security and freedom for the Palestinians and calling for the death of Canada.
Exactly.
And this from a separatist, Mr. Speaker.
You know what? I'm
Message to
agreeing with the bloc for once.
Ask your government why it's doing absolutely nothing instead of intimidating your Jewish neighbors in Quebec and Canada who have nothing to do with this. That's the difference between a pro-Palestinian demonstration for peace and an anti-Jewish demonstration for violence. The Honourable Member for Markham-Unionville.
Speaker, I rise today in support of Bill C-71, a vital piece of legislation that addresses long-standing injustice faced by lost Canadians. Individuals who, due to the Harper conservative first-generation limit, have been unfairly excluded from Canadian citizenship. These individuals have lived, worked, and contributed to Canada. Bill C-71 will grant citizenship to those who were unfairly impacted by the previous Conservative government while establishing a substantial connection to Canada's test moving forward. I look forward to working with parliamentarians from all parties to get this work done. It is time to right this historical wrong and ensure that all who should rightfully be Canadians are recognized as such. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Red Deer, Mountain View.
One of the great local heroes of Markerville, Alberta, is renowned Icelandic poet Stefán G. Stefánsson. Born into poverty in northern Iceland in 1853, he immigrated to the U.S. in 1873 and then in 1889 to his Markerville home. Farmer by day and prolific poet by night, he composed verse, not in English, but in his native Icelandic. He has been called the greatest poet of the Western world, publishing more than 2,000 pages of high-standard poetry. The local Stefán G. Stefánsson Icelandic Society, formed 50 years ago, restored the original home site, which is now an Alberta Provincial Historical Site. The Writers Guild of Alberta annually presents the Stefán G. Stefánsson Award in his honor as they celebrate this amazing poet and playwright. Recently, Donna Nelson, volunteer extraordinaire, was recognized for her exemplary contribution to the preservation and presentation of Alberta's heritage. Congratulations, Donna.
The Honourable Member from Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, as we celebrate Women's History Month this October, we're reminded of the incredible impact women have made and continue to make in our economy and communities. The theme, Women at Work, Economic Growth, Past, Present, and Future, beautifully highlights this ongoing journey. Today, we celebrate incredible local leaders in my riding, like Monique Dennison from the Richmond Hill Board of Trade and Sandra Ferry from the Chamber of Commerce, who are working every day to support businesses. Entrepreneurs like Tanya Lindsay and small business owners like Deborah Clark and Jacqueline Zhang. Real estate like Heidi Kreiner-Lee, and young women like Paris Johnson. And many other women who are so vital to the small and medium businesses in our communities. Over the last 40 years, women have powered 1/3 of Canada's economic growth, and there's still so much potential ahead. Our government not only celebrates women's history, but believes in their future. We will always support women and protect their rights, unlike the official opposition and its leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Saint-Laurent.
Mr. Speaker, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, a time to increase awareness and raise funds for research into its cause, prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and cure. Notre gouvernement a financé le...
Our government has funded a study into preventive care to help to accelerate various treatments for breast cancer. More and more women, particularly Indigenous women and Black women with breast cancer in 40 years are 40 years old and not 50.
There's not enough Canadian research to justify making a change. Mr. Speaker, that in itself is unacceptable and indicates that we need more relevant and recent research done on women's health that must include Black, Asian, and Indigenous women.
Unfortunately, in some provinces, the recommendation to start screening is at 50. This means that many people are diagnosed already at an advanced stage, which reduces their chance of survival.
All of the awesome organizations and businesses, including Pink in the City and Alphabet Cafe, who have campaigns of their own for this very worthy cause. Your contributions are saving lives, and we want to thank you very much.
The honourable member from New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, DFO officials in writing told me 10 months ago they would work with the Harbour Authority at Sealy's Cove on critical wharf repairs. Yesterday, DFO announced this federal wharf would be condemned. And I've discovered no discussions about repairs at Sealy's Cove happened with the Harbour Authority. In other words, I was misled by a public servant. This is after the Liberals cut small craft harbour funding in my New Brunswick riding, as well as in neighbouring Fundy Royal, this year to support Liberal ridings. The Fisheries Minister even allocated $45 million to wharves in her Quebec riding this summer to save her neck in the next elections. No wonder Canadians believe this Liberal government is corrupt. It is inexcusable for DFO officials to lie to a member of Parliament. It is unforgivable for public servants to operate like partisan Liberals. What the hell is going on at DFO, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans?
If I had to guess, it's probably China. Trudeau sold out to China.
I'm going to ask the honourable member from New Brunswick Southwest to please withdraw the language which is not considered parliamentary. I'm going to ask the honourable member from New Brunswick Southwest to withdraw that word which is not considered parliamentary.
I withdraw that unparliamentary language. The rest stand.
And if I could encourage all members...
We're starting off early with withdrawing comments already. Come on, Greg.
Members, please, to avoid using language which is clearly not...
Colleagues, please.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
À l'ordre.
Order, please. The honourable member for Vimy.
I really think today is going to be a heated day. I've got a strong feeling about it.
This week, the Tourism Industry Association of Canada is holding their Hill Days events to showcase our tourism industry and to highlight the importance of the visitor economy. I want to thank them for their work and advocacy for Canadian tourism businesses.
Our government supports the tourism sector with programs like the Tourism Growth Program, available in all regional development agencies. The Conservatives are jeopardizing tourism business support programs with their austerity policies.
We know that investing in tourism leads to economic growth, job creation, environmental protection, and supports the flourishing of local culture, including Indigenous heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Saskatoon University.
More proof the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, crime, or the corruption. The Attorney General found that Liberal appointees, the Green Slush Fund, gave nearly $400 million taxpayers' dollars to their own companies, with over 186 conflict of interest alone, at a time when Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, and house themselves. The Speaker has ruled that the NDP Liberal Costly Coalition violated the House orders to turn over evidence to the police for a criminal investigation into the latest scandal. Obstruction of justice? Anybody? Anybody? Instead of coming clean, the NDP Liberals have chosen to paralyze...
That's what we were saying the other day. Obstruction of justice. Not handing over documents under a lawful order. But here we are. I think day 5, 6 now.
For corruption, and Parliament can get back to work.
The honourable member for Chicoutimi-Lafiore. Mr. Speaker, I'm very concerned for our forestry workers in the regions who are deeply attached to their profession. The Liberals, with the support of the Bloc, are not only ignoring their concerns, but threatening them with a decree that will kill at least 1,400 jobs. The Minister of the Environment's decision will seriously jeopardize the survival of this region without even having to take in the trouble to meet them. What we know is that the Bloc is no...
It's day 8. Wow, that is even worse. Holy shit.
The proof is the nomination of their new candidate, Patrick Bonin, who has taken a clear position in favour of the decree and is asking the federal government to intervene. Wow, it's really the Bloc Liberal coalition. The Bloc Liberal coalition has no understanding of what's happening in our regions. Ignoring these realities will not only be irresponsible, but also reveal a glaring gap between Montreal's concerns and those of the regions. It's time to take action to protect jobs and the future of our regions. Let's put an end to this hypocrisy and give way to common sense. The honourable member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges.
So I know it's Wednesday and everybody is technically supposed to show up, but will Trudeau actually show up today?
Incredible country. Hundreds of thousands Canadians of Spanish descent have made Canada stronger, generously and proudly adding their language, history, and culture to the great tapestry that we call our country.
Today, for the first time, in the presence of the Spanish ambassador to Canada, His Excellency Alfredo Martinez Serrano, his wife Rosa Martinez Serrano, State Secretary Olmedo, members of this House, as well as prominent members of Canada's Spanish community. The ceremony served to reinforce the strong ties between Canada and Spain and honor those, like my own grandparents and great-grandparents, who came to our shores following a long journey across the Atlantic. May the strong ties between Canada and Spain only continue to grow, Mr. Speaker, and may Spain and Canada see peace and prosperity in our time. Gracias. Merci. Thank you.
The honourable member from Vancouver East.
As the catastrophic war rages on in Sudan, thousands of children are facing imminent death from malnutrition. Gender-based violence targeting women and girls, including sexual assault, is being used as a weapon of war. To date, not one single person has been brought to safety, and the minister's not expecting any arrivals this year. Lives are lost as they wait for their application to be processed. The NDP is once again calling for the government to expedite processing, allow trusted organizations like the IOM to help with biometrics, remove the 3,250 arbitrary application cap, and expand the program to include vulnerable children and those who were outside of Sudan prior to April 15, 2023 and can't get back home due to the war. Over 286,000 Ukrainians had arrived in Canada under the Kuwait program. Sudanese Canadians deserve equitable treatment in the world's largest displacement crisis.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Drummond. There are parts of our history that the great history has left behind, which find themselves erased in the limbo of oblivion, and yet history cannot be adequately explained without these all too frequently forgotten pivotal moments. Fortunately, in Quebec, we have documentary filmmakers who shed an unusual, unique light on our society, stepping outside the official lines to help us rediscover ourselves. These unmasking men and women of the past, of the discarded real, are to whom we are indebted. Pierre Perrault, Denis Arcand, Michel Brault, Pierre Filardeau, Manon Barbeau, Will Prosper, to name a few. Félix Rose, who is in Ottawa today, belongs to this long lineage of history tellers. He reminds us of significant events we've left out of the national narrative, whether it's the latest Félix or the Bataille de Saint-Léonard, which he will be presenting in Gatineau this evening. Mr. Rose, we salute the exceptional and indispensable work of you as a documentary filmmaker, and I would ask everyone to attend these conscience-raising films in large numbers.
The honourable colleagues, chers collègues.
Colleagues.
Colleagues, please.
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are making Canada unsafe. Violent crime is up 50%. And under this Prime Minister, hate crimes are up 251%. To make matters worse, the NDP Liberals are allowing a terrorist organization to operate freely within our borders, refusing to list Samidoun as a terrorist organization under the Anti-Terrorism Act. Israel and Germany have already listed Samidoun as a terrorist organization. The EU deported the leadership of Samidoun. What exactly are the NDP Liberals waiting for?
What exactly is our country doing? That is the question that should be getting asked. Why are we doing this? Why is the Liberal government so incredibly incompetent at pretty much everything?
Peace within our communities.
The honourable member from Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, in Canada and around the world, we have seen the emergence of radical far-right movements. These movements have had a profound impact on the type of governments that have been elected and on the lives of millions of people around the world, including here in Canada. They've organized disinformation campaigns designed to divide people and undermine confidence in reliable sources of information. They've impacted how some people treat others. They've impacted how some politicians treat others, including here in Canada, and they've led to some politicians acting against the best interests of Canadians by opposing sound economic policies, by opposing sound social policies like dental care or child care.
You know, it's funny. They want to talk about these far-right groups or whatever, but I have failed to see one video or picture or anything relating to these far-right groups. You know what I have seen, though? A group that is pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah, that yells death to Canada and burns the Canadian flag openly in Canadian streets. That is what I have seen. Many videos of, many pictures of. So, what is the government really going to do about that? Question period has just begun. Let's get into it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives would have liked to work hard in Parliament today to do something about...
It is. It's the next step of the political theater. We are heading into the next act, like you said, Sean.
Which is 36% higher than in the United States. But unfortunately, instead, Parliament is paralyzed due to this Prime Minister. He paralyzed this House by blocking the documents that we ordered to be sent to the RCMP about a $400 million scandal. What exactly is this Prime Minister hiding? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the Leader of the Opposition said is completely false. Let me read what the RCMP said about this motion. They said there is a significant risk that this motion may be seen as a way of sidestepping normal inquiry processes and protecting the Charter. We are ready to send this to committee and return to the important business of this House. Thank you.
She's been saying that for the past 3 days now.
This is a $400 million scandal, 8 times more than the sponsorship scandal in financial terms. The AG has found that there were 186 conflicts of interest. The leader of the Green Slush Fund has already been found guilty of violating the law. When someone steals from you, do you call the cops or do you simply send the matter to a committee? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, it's very clear that Canadians have had enough of the little games played by the Conservative Party, and they're tired of these Conservative slogans. They've also had enough of the Conservative filibustering. On this side of the House, as we've said several times, We will always be here to protect people's rights and freedoms in Canada. We will always stand up for democracy, and we will fight for Canada. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Conservatives would have liked to be working today to counter the doubling of housing costs this Prime Minister has caused, or the record food price inflation, which has been 36% higher in Canada than in the US. But unfortunately, the Prime Minister has paralyzed Parliament by refusing your ruling directing his government to turn over evidence in the $400 million green slush fund scandal that the Auditor General says involves 186 conflicts of interest. Wow. With the chair of the fund found guilty, what has he got to hide?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is not being truthful with Canadians. It is the RCMP Commissioner himself who said the RCMP's ability to receive and use information obtained through this production order and under the compulsory powers afforded by the Auditor General Act in the course of a criminal investigation could give rise to concerns under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is therefore highly unlikely that any information obtained by the RCMP under the motion where privacy interests exist could be used to support a criminal prosecution or further a criminal investigation. Mr. Speaker, let's get this.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This is a $400 million scandal involving Liberal appointees giving millions of dollars to their own companies, and the minister's story is now changing. Yep. Last week, she claimed that the government had given documents to the RCMP. This week, they claim that if they gave documents to the RCMP, it would cause the Charter of Rights to come crashing down. It sounds like there's a new story every week to justify paralyzing Parliament to cover up the truth. What is in these documents about this $400 million scandal that the Prime Minister is so afraid of?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
This is a typical witch hunt from the Leader of the Opposition to go after people who have nothing to do with this. These are files such as personnel files that contain private information of individuals who have nothing to do with what is going on. Mr. Speaker, it is the RCMP and the Auditor General themselves who raised concerns with this motion, and it is the government's view that we should send this to committee so that we can get on with the important work of this House and protect the rights of Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
A witch hunt. The Ethics Commissioner appointed by this government has found the chair of the fund in violation of the law. The Auditor General, also appointed by this government, says there were 186 conflicts of interest involving Liberal appointees giving millions of dollars to their own companies. $400 million. Potential criminality, according to the main whistleblower in the scandal. Any other employer would voluntarily turn over all the evidence to the police if it had been ripped off by its own staff. What is the Prime Minister hiding?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, if and when the police request that information, it will obviously be handed over because that is proper judicial process. But when it is Parliament that is doing it, this is where Canadians should be concerned, Mr. Speaker, because when he is going after the rights of...
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Trudeau's taken a very long vacation overseas when all of this is like starting to really kind of come out. Pierre's pushing for it harder than ever before. The entire Conservative Party is calling them out for it, but, you know, Trudeau's doing his thing, going on his multi-million-dollar vacations, flying in his big jet, calling out Canadians on the carbon tax stuff while he continues to waste thousands and thousands of gallons of jet fuel. Fucking crazy.
Based on its democratic election, does this government still agree that supply management should be exempted from all further trade negotiations in future? The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, and being a dairy farmer for a large portion of my life, I fully understand and appreciate the value of the supply management program, Mr. Speaker. Our government fully supports Bill C-282 and urges the other place to move on this legislation as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member. Let me further clarify, Mr. Speaker. There are 2 senators, neither of them elected. They're not saying that they're not sure. They're saying very clearly that supply management should be up for grabs in future trade negotiations. It should not be excluded from them. They are saying the opposite of what the government is saying. By not imposing its will on 2 non-elected senators, is this government turning its backs on agricultural producers in Quebec and Canada? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, my colleagues should not come to me to say that our government is turning its backs on dairy producers. We have always been there for dairy producers from the very beginning, and we will continue to stand up for them. Mr. Speaker, we decided to appoint independent senators. And once again, I think the Bloc Québécois should be able to understand this concept.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
You won't believe this. Corporate landlords are using AI technology to rip off renters. They're jacking up rent.
Oh
now, the United
boy,
States
here
is
we
taking
go.
legal action against this, but the Liberals are letting it happen here in Canada. Now, I know the Conservatives don't care because their chief advisor is also a chief lobbyist for corporate landlords. But what's the Liberals' excuse?
And Jagmeet, what about your multi-million-dollar pension that you've thrown Canadians under the bus to get?
Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for his question and his concern for the rising cost of rent, which I completely agree is a very serious issue. Where we differ is we're not satisfied with just launching complaints on the floor of the House of Commons. We want to advance policies that actually put solutions on the table that make a meaningful difference for families. That's why we're putting measures in place to help build more homes, like cutting taxes on apartment construction. It's why we're increasing investments to build more affordable housing, and it's why we put a Renters' Bill of Rights on the table to help protect renters in precarious situations. I only wish the NDP would care enough to join us in trying to do something about the problem.
The Honourable Member of Burnaby South.
Excuses are way cheaper than rent. Shamattawa First Nation has had undrinkable water since 2018. And this Liberal government is fighting them in court, arguing that they do not have a legal responsibility to clean the water. They're also arguing that when a minister says something, that's just politics. That's not something you have to believe that they're actually going to do. Will the Liberals call off the lawyers and clean up the water?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we've been doing over the last 9 years, cleaning up the mess that the Conservatives left behind with over $8 billion in investments in clean water operation plants across the country, Mr. Speaker. And we have legislation, incidentally, tied up in committee. Hopefully it will get to this House shortly. I will be testifying tomorrow about the legislation. There are hundreds of chiefs that have called on the NDP and the Conservatives to get this legislation moving through the House, so we never go back to that time again.
So, once again, we're a first world country. It's 2024, and there are still people that don't have clean drinking water here in Canada, but we're trying to fight climate change, and we're trying to send millions and millions of dollars overseas to fight wars. What is going on here?
Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. Mr. Speaker, you ruled that the government has violated the House order to turn over evidence to the RCMP related to the $400 million green slush fund scandal. Yet, the Liberal government continues to obstruct justice by refusing to turn over these documents. When will they end this cover-up and let the House focus on solving the housing, food, and inflation crisis that they created?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the member opposite is saying is absolutely false. It is the Conservatives who are filibustering their own motion in this House because it is the RCMP and the Auditor General who have both raised their extreme discomfort with the motion that the Conservatives have put forward. If the Conservatives want to get back to work, we are ready to send this to committee to make sure that we can talk about the issues that matter to Canadians.
Then send it to the committee and get it over with. What is going on, man? Our country is just falling apart.
Obstructing justice and holding Parliament in contempt by refusing to hand over documents to the RCMP. Now we know why. The Auditor General has found that the Liberal-appointed board members gave nearly $400 million to their own companies. This is happening at a time when Canadians can barely afford food to eat and poverty diseases like scurvy have resurfaced in this country. Will the NDP Liberals take accountability and just hand over those documents to the Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, 3 times in this question period I've heard the Conservatives talk about obstructing justice. Let's just talk about how justice works in this country. When law enforcement wants to prosecute an individual,
This guy wants to talk about justice with the catch and release program. Oh, buddy. That's rich coming from him.
I'm going to invite the Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General to start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, 3 times in this question period so far, I've heard Conservatives talk about obstructing justice. Let's talk about how justice actually operates in a democracy. Law enforcement has a reasonable suspicion about an individual or an entity. They then go and seek a search warrant from a court so that they can invade that person's privacy and obtain the documents. Instead of pursuing the normal court processes, we have Conservatives saying we're going to subvert all of that for the purposes of partisan gain. This is what we do in a democracy. We stand up for judicial processes and we stand up for the Charter of Rights. We will always do that on this side of the House.
I'm not able to hear all comments, but I did hear the comments from the member from Glengarry Prescott Russell. I asked him not to take the microphone until he's recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
Taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up, and corruption is off the charts. A fish rots from the head down. So is it any wonder that Liberal cronies appointed to the Green Slush Fund by a Prime Minister twice convicted of ethics violations engaged in corruption? And this is not small corruption, Mr. Speaker. It's $400 million. And, Mr. Speaker, you ordered the production of these documents. Why won't these Liberals stop the cover-up and produce them?
A fish rots from the head down. That was a good one, because they're fucking scaly and slimy over on the Liberal side.
Question period and slogans are up, Mr. Speaker. Slogans are up again. Canadians are
Brace
sick
your
and
ears.
tired of them, Mr. Speaker, repeating the same false things, Mr. Speaker, and repeating the same slogan. What these Conservatives are about, Mr. Speaker, is going after the personal file of employees and former employees. They're targeting STDC today. Who are they going to target tomorrow? That's what on this side of the aisle. We stand for democracy. We'll stand for rights. We'll stand up for Canada.
The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
It's pretty simple who we're targeting, Mr. Speaker. We're targeting corruption, corruption that they enabled, corruption that they're hiding, and corruption that they refuse to produce the documents for. Mr. Speaker, these are documents that you ordered the production of. So Canadians should ask themselves, why aren't they producing them? They're not producing them because they are so damaging. They are so bad. They will destroy this government, and therefore they've used up 7 days of House of Commons time to hide their corruption. Stop the corruption. Produce the documents.
Colleagues, the Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Speaker, again, the Conservatives are saying things that are false. The only party that has been putting up speakers for the past week are the Conservatives. So they are the ones that are filibustering their own motion. But let's talk
Why is she still going? I can't hear anything she's saying. She is so quiet every time she speaks. Trudeau just throws her under the bus whenever he doesn't show up.
It is so important.
Trudeau makes her take all of the brunt from the other side. He does not ever show up himself to handle his own issues.
So the Honourable Leader of the Government, I'm going to ask her to repeat her answer again because I know that I've got some hand signals from members who were not able to hear that answer. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I notice the volume gets up when they don't want to hear the truth. So let's go back to that. The only members of Parliament who have been debating this motion are Conservative members of Parliament. They are filibustering their own motion. And let me tell you why, Mr. Speaker. It might have something to do with Rob Walsh, the former law clerk, who stated, "It is an abuse of its powers for the House to use its power to demand and get documents from the government in order to transfer them to a third party that wouldn't otherwise receive them, or to compel the government to give documents to the third party." They want to get around the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They're going after Canadians. Who's next?
L'honorable député de Charlebourg-Haute.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, in La Presse this morning, we saw that Myriam Bandoui, 15 years old, was killed by a stray bullet. Thomas Trudel, 16, also died due to a shooting. A 14-year-old lost their life while trying to set a fire in Beauce, and a French tourist and her 7-year-old daughter were visiting Montreal and died in an arson attack. The Minister of Justice has blamed the government of Quebec for this, but the Liberal government is responsible for all this violence.
An
when will
arson
they finally trigger
attack?
an election so we can fix this?
What is going on?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows very well that we are working with the provinces in order to do something about exactly this type of violence. We are constantly speaking with police forces, with provincial public safety ministers, and we will continue
I'm not buying this for a second, buddy. Just the other day, you had people in the streets of Canada burning, or in the streets of Vancouver, Canada, burning the flag, burning the Canadian flag, and chanting "Death to Canada." I don't believe for a second that you are in talks with anybody about stopping these kind of individuals.
For 9 years, the Liberal government has only been bringing in legislation that actually weakened our ability to address crime. Today, criminals are just running around in the streets unafraid of police forces or the justice system. Will this Prime Minister bring the legislation back to how it was under the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General. On this side of the House, we have invested in our borders, we have invested in our police forces, and we have invested in increasing penalties for things like auto crime. We know that if there are issues that have to do with provincial jurisdiction, we need to ask questions to governments like the Legault government. We need to ask them about how the staffing levels are at their detention centers. We need to ask them about the details of their police services. It's this type of thing that we need to fix the problem. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Minister said to me that I should not in any way say that she's turning her back on producers, but I think this government is turning its back on producers. They don't seem to care about these 6,000 businesses in Quebec or 100,000 jobs. They don't seem to care at all. Time is up. And all they're actually doing is providing us with excellent arguments for Quebec independence. The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Liberals stand completely behind the supply managed system. Our dairy, poultry, and egg producers have our full support. Farmers have two real options. Only two real options for the future. A Liberal government that believes in the current system and wants to protect it, or the other option, which is not at all unanimous on the topic of supply management. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, there are two other options. Electing a maximum number of Bloc Québécois MPs or sovereignty. That's the other two options. There are just so many failures on the part of this Liberal government. They are so incompetent. Soon it will be too late. Pretty soon, even the NDP won't be able to show its face with these Liberals. Who's really the boss here?
Yeah, it's hard to say if somebody else will take over for Speaker or not. I have no idea. All I know is Greg he's been messing up pretty bad. He hasn't been doing a good job. He's pretty corrupt, pretty one-sided. There's definitely a bit of bias towards the Liberals with Greg. And it's obvious when you see him constantly banning Poilievre over his comments.
Speaker, my colleague spoke about incompetence. If there's someone who's really unable to do anything for farmers and producers, it's the leader of the Bloc Québécois. Because he's chosen to constantly go on about sovereignty and independence instead of actually addressing our urgent issues. This bill on supply management, the only reason it exists is that there was a Liberal government in power at the time, and that Liberal government is still in power. If it were a Conservative or a Bloc government, we wouldn't have that legislation.
The Honourable Member from Mission Matsby, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. The Auditor General reported 186 conflicts of interest and over $400 million in misspent funds that went to Liberal insiders. The Minister of Environment's former employer, Cycle Capital, received $250 million from the Green Slush Fund, all while over half of Canadian small businesses are losing money year over year. Why is it okay for Liberals to enrich their friends while small businesses are struggling to stay afloat?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
You know, Mr. Speaker, what's not okay is for the Conservative to repeat the same thing time and time again when they know it's false, Mr. Speaker. Exactly. Because the reality, and let's talk about facts, Mr. Speaker. The entity they're talking about was created in 2001. It was managed by the Conservative for 9 years, Mr. Speaker. The CEO of that organization is gone, the board is gone, and the foundation no longer exists, Mr. Speaker. That is the reality. What the Conservative are about is going after ordinary Canadians, those who work at this organization, Mr. Speaker. We're going to stand for democracy, we're going to stand for rights, and we're going to stand for the work that needs to be done by this House, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mission. The Honourable Member from Mission Matsby, Fraser Canyon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada lost 9,037 businesses from May to June 2024 and 6,331 declared insolvency year over year. The closures we're witnessing right now haven't been this large since the pandemic when the entire country was shut down. So when Canadian entrepreneurs and workers are struggling, business is still booming for Liberal insiders. Why is the Prime Minister hiding behind the Green Slush Fund documents, and when will he release them to Parliament?
Yeah, he started talking and I honestly just turned my headset volume down. I could not take it.
Continue to support
I don't know what's going on, but the House keeps like muting people.
Entrepreneurs. We're increasing the lifetime capital gains exemption. We're investing in Canadian startups. We're boosting government procurement for small and medium-sized businesses and supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs as well. And Mr. Speaker, it gives me the opportunity to also announce here that we've negotiated agreements with both MasterCard and Visa to lower those interchange fees by up to 27%, which takes place as of October 19th of this month. We'll continue to support small businesses, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much.
The Honourable Member from Perth Wellington.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up,
crime is up, and time is up. Mr. Speaker, you yourself ruled that this government violated an order of this House to turn over evidence to the police for a criminal investigation into the latest Liberal scandal. The government's refusal to accept your ruling has paralyzed Parliament, pushing aside our work to address the doubling of housing costs, food inflation, crime, and chaos. Will the minister end the cover-up, give the proof to the RCMP so we can get Parliament working again for all Canadians?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, what the members opposite are saying is not true. Your ruling was very clear. Because of the unprecedented nature of that motion, it should go to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee for study. The RCMP and the Auditor General raised their extreme discomfort with the Conservative motion. Canadians should be concerned because the Conservatives are going after whoever they hold a political grudge against, and
It's $400 million plus that are just they've just disappeared.
The honourable member.
What are you
for
going on
Romani
about that the
Vile
Conservatives are
Carlos
going
Cardozo
after
Jr.?
Canadians?
Mr. Speaker, this is a
She is
$400
wild.
million scandal. That's the amount of taxpayer money that has ended up in the pockets of Liberal buddies. Meanwhile, Canadians are facing food insecurity, crime, and skyrocketing housing costs. And instead, this Liberal corruption is blocking our parliamentary work. It is completely paralyzed due to this Liberal government's corruption and financial mismanagement.
They
Will
keep
this
saying
government
like
finally
Parliament
provide the
is
documents
paralyzed
so
and
that
like
we can
things
get
aren't
back to work?
continuing and they're ground to a halt because of this, but like they're still voting on stuff
Honourable
every
Minister of
day.
Public
Like
Services and
everything is
Procurement.
still proceeding as
Thank
normal.
you, Mr. Speaker.
I
My
don't
colleague spoke
I don't really know
about
where
financial
things have
accountability.
stopped
And here's
or
what the RCMP
they can't
had to say
proceed.
about responsibility. He said
Might need
that
some
the
info on that
RCMP
one.
is an arm's length organization, and that he completely supports the independence of police forces in a democratic society, which means that this House and government cannot direct police operations. Can anything be clearer than that? Do the Conservatives need a briefing with a leader of the RCMP? It should be clear enough, in my opinion.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton, Griesbach.
This week, the honourable chiefs from the Prince Albert Grand Council are in Ottawa fighting for their people. In their communities, overcrowding and poor quality housing is leading to mental, physical, and social crisis. Tuberculosis, a disease that has run rampant during the residential school time, is on the rise again in Indigenous communities. Children are dying. Why has the government continued the decades-old Liberal and Conservative tradition of refusing to provide the needed funding to end this cycle?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Relations.
Mr.
Services.
Speaker, every step of the way over the past 9 years, this government has worked with First Nations leaders, Indigenous leaders across the country to restore rights and to restore self-determination and to restore funding, Mr. Speaker, that was under heavy attack from the Conservative Party of Canada. We have so much more to do together, including on working on mental health, which this government continues to support First Nations-led solutions for. We're going to continue this hard work with partners exactly like the ones that are here today.
The Honourable Member from Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' misguided one-size-fits-none return-to-office mandate is hurting workers and Canadians trying to access vital public services. This rushed mandate was done without due consultation, unfairly impacting dedicated workers. Is this the Liberals' method of natural attrition or an underhanded attack on skilled public servants? We know Conservatives sure don't have workers' backs, but will the Liberals repeal this unfair mandate?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board and Minister for Transport.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague is exactly right. Conservatives do not have workers back, unlike this side of the House.
Yes.
Our top priority is to deliver quality programs and services to Canadians. We are committed to ensuring that our public servants are supported through this change to the directive on hybrid work. It's our expectation that departments work with their union management committees during the implementation phases that are before us. The clerk and the department heads will continue to monitor and work with the unions and the public service. Thank you.
The honourable member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, recently I stood alongside the Premier of Manitoba, federal colleagues and healthcare workers as we made a major investment of $630 million in the province's healthcare system. After Conservatives in Manitoba decimated healthcare over a decade of cuts and closures, this funding was desperately needed. The redevelopment of Portage Place is a generational project aimed at revitalizing the downtown core, in large part by establishing a new state-of-the-art healthcare facility. It simply does not happen without federal support. Can the Minister for Prairies outline how our government is supporting this significant redevelopment and what it means for the future of Winnipeg? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you for that question. Mr. Speaker, big things are happening in Winnipeg's downtown. Thanks to collaboration between the three levels of government, the private sector, and Southern chiefs, we're revitalizing the core of our city to make it more livable for everyone. Despite calls by Conservative politicians to cut funding to Prairie Scan, we are making a significant federal investment in the redevelopment of Portage Place to build more homes that people can afford, to build a new healthcare center in the center of downtown and offer other public spaces. Mr. Speaker, we are walking a new path together, and Winnipeggers are proud.
The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. The corruption of this Liberal government knows no bounds. The Liberal Minister of Employment has continuously misled Parliament about his alter ego, the other Randy. Texts from his business partner reference a Randy, and we now know there was no other Randy involved in the fraudulent medical supply company while he was a sitting member of Cabinet. When will the minister come clean with Canadians, end this charade, and resign?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ethics Commissioner has looked into this matter 3 times and each time has confirmed he has no concerns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 long years of this Liberal NDP government, taxes are up, costs are up, corruption is up, and apparently the amount of Randys is up.
Oh,
the Minister
no.
of Employment has been accused of violating the law by engaging in improper business dealings with his corrupt, scandal-plagued partner. The minister claimed he wasn't involved in this business, but was later forced to admit that he was. He should admit he is the other Randy and that he violated the law. When will the minister come clean and admit to everyone what we all know?
The Honourable Leader of the Government.
It took an hour, but we finally got to a Randy question.
The Ethics Commissioner has looked into this matter 3 times and each time has confirmed he has no concerns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Shepherd.
9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is now up for them. The Liberal minister from Edmonton claimed he had no contact with his business partner during an alleged $500,000 fraud linked to the other Randy. But phone records and text messages now show the complete opposite. It seems the minister made a habit of bending the rules and using his influence to benefit his business partner. The same business partner that you, Speaker, have now found is in contempt of Parliament. So it's really simple. Will the minister admit that the charade is up and then admit that he broke the law and confirm that he is in fact the other Randy?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In case my honourable colleague didn't hear my previous answer, as I stated, the Ethics Commissioner has looked into this matter 3 times and each time has confirmed he has no concerns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, Fact 1, PFLP is a listed terrorist entity. Fact 2, Khaled Barakat was a member of PFLP when he founded Sammy Doon in 2012, and his wife Charlotte Cates incorporated Sammy Doon under Canadian law in 2021. Fact 3, under Section 8305 of the Criminal Code, any entity that has knowingly acted on behalf of, at the direction of, or in association with a listed entity can be listed. The facts are clear. The government's position is not. Why hasn't the government listed Sammy Doon as a terrorist entity under the criminal code?
The Honourable Minister for Public Security.
Speaker, the government's position has in fact been very clear. Decisions around listing terrorist entities are made based on the advice of security and intelligence officials My colleague, the parliamentary secretary, made it clear yesterday. I have instructed the security and intelligence agencies that report to us to do on an expedited basis a review of these matters. And I've said, Mr. Speaker, we hope to come back to Canadians with information very soon.
The honourable member for Shefford. When we demand an increase in old age security payments for 65 to 74-year-olds, the Minister of Seniors accuses us of saying no to seniors. But he should know that the Bloc Québécois is on team yes. Yes to pensioners, yes to improving their living conditions, yes to no longer having two categories of seniors. It's the Minister who is on team no. His only achievement since taking office has been to say no to pension increases. That is his only achievement. Saying no. Why doesn't he join Team Yes to Seniors? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. I would like to reassure my colleague and the entire Bloc Québécois that we know that they're saying yes to seniors. But, Mr. Speaker, they said no a lot too. They've said no to all increases in supports to Quebec and Canadian seniors. 2.4 million seniors are benefiting from the GIS increase. We increased it, but the Bloc Québécois voted against that. The Honourable Member for Shefford. The Bloc Québécois is not alone in saying yes to seniors. 79% of Canadians say yes to increasing old age security for 65 to 74-year-olds. The House of Commons says yes. Seniors say yes. Seniors groups are saying yes, including the FADOC, the AQDR, and the AREC. Imagine, even the AREC from Outaouais, the minister's own region, came out to support us on the Hill. The minister is standing alone. In fact, in his riding alone, he could help 12,000 people. Can he wake up? Today, Verdun.
Whoa, she
tomorrow,
got angry there. Maybe she's not as sleepy as I always think she is. Maybe she's more awake than she looks.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Well, I have often visited my colleague's beautiful region. I encourage her to visit Outaouais. The Outaouais is my region, and when she's in the Outaouais, she can explain to the 14,000 people in her riding of Shefford, because those 14,000 in her riding are today benefiting from the Canada Dental Care Plan, and she can explain to them, Mr. Speaker, why she voted against that. I encourage all members, including and especially the member for Lac-Saint-Jean, to not rise before having been recognized by the chair. Oh, I may be mistaken in who I named, and if that is the case, then I do apologize. But the members in that part of the room, please do not take the floor before recognized by the chair.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, grocery prices are up, and time is up. A year ago, the Liberals promised to lower food prices by Thanksgiving. All Canadians got were empty promises and empty stomachs. Now they're going to pay $80 for a turkey this Thanksgiving. Food inflation in Canada is 37% higher than the United States. Food security is up 111% thanks to the NDP Liberal carbon tax. Will the NDP Liberal government axe the carbon tax so Canadians can afford a Thanksgiving dinner?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can assure the member that it's much cheaper at Thanksgiving dinner in Shawinigan. I don't know where he's shopping for his turkey, Mr. Speaker. I'll invite him to my house in Shawinigan. He'll find out it's a bit cheaper. But, Mr. Speaker, the reality is what this government has done, and it's said by all the economists in Canada, Mr. Speaker, what we've done, which is the most significant thing, is to reform competition in this country, Mr. Speaker, to have less concentration, more choice for consumer, which stabilize price, Mr. Speaker. And in addition, they should celebrate. We now have a grocery code of conduct in this country, Mr. Speaker, to bring more fairness and stabilize price in the country.
The Honourable Member from Foothills.
I don't think many Canadians find the minister making fun of their struggles much of a joke.
That's right.
Because the reality is, for many Canadians, buying that turkey for Thanksgiving is just a dream. The Liberal NDP government has made the Canadian dream a food bank nightmare. 1 million Canadians just in Ontario went to a food bank last year, up 25%. And now doctors are raising the alarm on scurvy in Canada because Canadians can't afford basic nutrition. Will the Liberal NDP government make the Canadian dream come true and call a carbon tax
And not only are they liars, but he also made a joke saying, like, you can come over to my house and see the price of turkey. And it's like, man, you're an MP, you're getting paid a pretty good salary. So to sit there and then make that kind of comment, it's a little interesting to say the least.
Speaker, there's 4.3 million families and over 7 million children across this country who receive this benefit each and every month. That's $547 a month for parents with children ages 6 to 18, or $648 each month. I got to speak recently with a new mom named Madeline who shared how impactful this is for her family. The position the Conservatives have...
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, it's just unreal how out of touch this Liberal government is. Over the past 9 years of this Liberal government, the cost of living has skyrocketed. I urge the Liberals to climb down from their ivory tower and go to a grocery store. It's crazy how high prices are, how much they've gone up. And the Bloc Québécois
It's crazy
is
how
constantly voting
out
to
of
keep
touch
this
the
Liberal
Liberals
government in
truly are.
place. I beg the Bloc Québécois to please not take Quebecers for fools. When is this Liberal government going to have some common sense and stop wasting the money of honest and hardworking Canadians? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives are very hypocritical. They talk about Canadians in need, but they don't support funding community food programs and not-for-profit organizations. They talk about people living on the street, but they oppose investments to build more housing. They have a hidden agenda, Mr. Speaker, and everything they say in this House is utter nonsense. The Honourable Member for Saint-Léonard Saint-Michel. Mr. Speaker, Montreal's East End is brimming with opportunities. Last November, at the Sommet de l'Est, the Minister of Economic Development announced $30 million for businesses and organizations in the East End through the Initiative to Support Economic Development in Montreal's East End. Can the Minister tell us how our government is supporting the enormous potential of Montreal's East End to become a leading centre of economic and social development in Quebec? The Honourable Minister of Regional Development. Of Tourism, pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague. We are both members for areas in the East End of Montreal. Last week, I announced the launch of a call for proposals for social innovation projects in the East End of Montreal. This is the first time that a $1 million investment will lead to new social and innovation projects that will generate economic, social, and environmental benefits in the East End of Montreal. Mr. Speaker, I invite all businesses to submit their applications by November 29th. We are here to support the East End of Montreal to ensure that it's part of tomorrow's economy.
Michael. Then I have the honourable member from Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, the government has all sorts of excuses why it won't provide documents to this House or to the RCMP about the $400 million spending scandal. They falsely claim it would violate privacy and that it would negatively impact the RCMP's investigation and that it would violate charter rights. The Constitution is clear. Parliament is supreme. Parliament has the lawful authority to order the production of documents. So why is this government consistently trampling on the constitutional authority of this House?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that was some incredible doublespeak from my colleague across the way. It's actually the RCMP who has said this, and I quote, "The RCMP's ability to receive and use information obtained through this production order and under the compulsory powers afforded by the Auditor General Act in the course of a criminal investigation could give rise to concerns under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There is significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention of normal investigative processes and charter protections. For a party that claims to respect the police, they certainly don't respect police independence.
Exactement.
The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms also includes Sections 3, Sections 4, and Sections 5, which is about the democratic rights of Canadians. And Canadians have the right to be democratically elected on the floor of this House, and the majority of this House has demanded the production of these documents related to the $400 million spending scandal. We did the same thing with the Winnipeg lab documents. Why does this government consistently ignore the democratic wishes of the people's elected representatives and deny this House documents?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney
Mr. Speaker,
General.
I have a lot of respect for that member opposite because he usually stands up for institutions, including this place. What he's not standing up for right now is for the independence of law enforcement in this country. The independence of law enforcement is pivotal. And what my colleague was emphasizing is that usually my friends opposite are constantly listening to the police. This is what the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP said on the news yesterday. It's a very dangerous situation. The rule of law is predicated upon a separation between what Parliament is doing and what law enforcement agencies are doing. In this case, the RCMP. We're listening to those RCMP commissioners and former commissioners. I wish the member opposite would do the same.
The honourable member from Calgary Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, for years they've known Sami Doon as a known terror affiliate. On October 7th, they chanted, "We are Hezbollah, we are Hamas, death to Canada, death to America, death to Israel." They incited hate, they incited terror, they burned our flag. Why does our foreign minister fail to act when Canada is threatened? Well, she told Tom Mulcair it's about the demographics of her voters. Mr. Speaker, why does this minister put partisan politics over Canadian
Putting
national
DEI
security
over
interests?
national security. That is wild.
Order. The Honourable Minister for Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, our government is deeply concerned about the national security interests of Canadians.
Then why aren't you
That's why
doing
we
anything?
support the law enforcement agencies and the security agencies.
The Liberal
that do this
government
important
4
work.
years ago
That's
wanted to
why we
defund the
rely on
police.
their advice to decide when the government, under the Criminal Code of Canada, should list a terrorist entity. Mr. Speaker, good news. These security agencies are constantly reviewing a whole series of organizations to determine if the threshold has been met. I recently talked to them as late as this morning, and I'm very confident that we'll have some important news very quickly.
The Honourable Member for Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle. Mr. Speaker, Canadians work hard all year round to be able to afford to go on holiday and visit their families. They want quality service from airlines. Last week, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of our government's approach to protect Canadian air passengers. Can the Minister of Transport share this excellent news with us? Thank you.
L'honorable ministre, l'honorable présidente,
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, we were the first government in Canadian history to pass legislation protecting air passengers. And that was the right thing to do, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Canadians. Canadians have rights. Canadians deserve protection. Canadians can count on our Liberal government. Unlike the Conservatives, we will always stand up for travellers and their rights. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver East.
Sudan now has the world's worst displacement of children anywhere. 17 months into this devastating humanitarian crisis, not one single Sudanese Canadian loved one has gotten to safety in Canada. A family member in Vancouver was desperate to bring his sister and her 2 daughters to safety. With months of inaction, the sister has now perished. The 2 children are alone. Will the minister expedite processing and expand eligibility of his restrictive program to include vulnerable children in Sudan?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member knows well that this was a plan that was devised with community members, with community organizations, and we worked hand in hand with them to put out this program to get 8,000 Sudanese people fleeing war. We plan to make sure that these people are here, hopefully by the end of the year, more next year, but I will constantly be working with those community members that I will be meeting with.
So what are they going to do when they get here? Just add on to the homeless population of people that you're just going to forget about in like a couple months when they finally do get here? Like, what is going on, man? You just said 8,000 plus people and more next year.
When someone goes to Tim Hortons and buys 6 donuts, they are exempt from paying taxes. But if they decide to buy 6 sugar-free, healthy bars, they do have to pay taxes. This means that people are paying more for healthy products, which is bad for our local entrepreneurs who face unfair competition from multinationals. Can the Prime Minister tell us whether he intends to ask his Minister of Finance to rectify this ridiculous situation? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've discussed the matter many times with my colleague. I understand that he cares deeply about this issue. This would involve some major changes to be made by the Department of Finance and the Department of Health, and we can look into the matter further. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It being 3:19 p.m. Oh, point of order. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, earlier, during question period, the member for Outremont used non-parliamentary language. I would like to invite her to take back what she said and to apologize.
Oh, here we go.
L'honorable député d'Outremont.
The Honourable Member for Outremont. Mr. Speaker, I think if you look back at the Hansard, you will see that that language has already been used, and I will be happy to give a further answer once you have been able to look into this.
From Regina Capella is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, the House Leader said that Liberals weren't participating in the current debate on Liberal corruption. I just wanted to know if I could table the speeches from the member from Winnipeg
So the Honourable Member unfortunately does not have unanimous consent to be able to table that document. Pour revenir.
As I was saying, coming back to the point of order raised by the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier, I will indeed look back and look into this, but based on my own memory, I think the word used was a word that, although it is regrettable, is one that is used frequently in this House, but I will come back to this if necessary.
Sounds like a bunch of boo-hoo. Bunch of boo-hoo bullshit. With everything going on, we're sitting here worrying about what somebody else said to another MP. God.
Call in the members.
No, and that's another thing. The Conservatives are promising a pretty big laundry list of things, and when they aren't able to pull through on some of them, it's gonna just make them look even worse in the end. And I really, look, my philosophy at the end of the day, I'm not a big fan of the Conservatives, but I really, really fucking hate the Liberals, and if the NDP or Bloc ever got into power, it would simply be the end of Canada as we know it. So right now, with the common sense approach, in air quotations, that the Conservatives are using, it realistically seems like the only option we have. But I'm not going to tell anybody who to vote for, how to vote. You're free to vote for whoever you please. But I'm just saying, with everything that's going on in recent time, the Liberal government has literally annihilated our country.
La question est...
The question is as follows. Mr. Nader, seconded by Mr. Aitchison, moved that the 31st report of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts presented on Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, be concurred in. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Schmiel.
Mr. Schmiel.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Schmiel.
Williams.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Brock.
Mr. Brock.
Mr. Deltel.
Mr. Deltel.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mr. Pulius.
Let's see if this is another 100% unanimous vote across the board here. Another payday for the MPs of Canada.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Aboutef.
Mr. Aboutef.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Ms. Ferrari.
Ms. Ferrari.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Macaulay Edmonton West.
Mr. Macaulay Edmonton West.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Brassard.
Mr. Brassard.
Mrs. Goodridge.
Mrs. Goodridge.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Godin.
Mr. Godin.
Mr. Morant.
Mr. Morant.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mr. Melillo.
Mr. Melillo.
Ms. Gladue.
Ms. Gladue.
Mrs. Cramp-Nyman.
Mrs. Cramp-Nyman.
Madame Vien.
Madame Vien.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Redicott.
Mr. Redicott.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Waugh.
Mr. Waugh.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
Monsieur Lehoux.
Monsieur Lehoux.
Mr. Généreux.
Monsieur Généreux.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Lobb.
Mr. Lobb.
Mr. Mazer.
Mr. Mazer.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Davidson.
Monsieur Gourde.
Monsieur Gourde.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Nader.
Mrs. Falk, Balfour's Lloydminster.
Mrs. Falk, Rutherford Lloydminster.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Falk Provencher.
Mr. Falk Provencher.
Mr. Mott.
Mr. Mott.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Soroka.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Kitchen.
Mr. Kitchen.
Monsieur Terrien.
Monsieur Terrien.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Madame Michaud.
Madame Michaud.
Monsieur Villemur.
Monsieur Villemur.
Monsieur Thériault.
Monsieur Thériault.
Madame Michaud.
Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Laroche.
Madame Saint-Clair Desgagnés.
Madame Saint-Clair Desgagnés.
Madame Chabot.
Madame Chabot.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Massey.
Mr. Massey.
Ms. Matheson.
Miss Matheson.
Mr. Johns.
Mr. Johns.
Miss McPherson.
Miss McPherson.
Miss Idlow.
Miss Idlow.
Mr. Green.
Mr. Green.
Mr. McGregor.
Mr. McGregor.
Ms. Dance.
Miss Dance.
Mr. Backrack.
Mr. Backrack.
Chronic homelessness. This is what they're doing right now. This is what the vote's for. Even though we just had a Liberal MP say that they wanted to bring in 8,000 new refugees from Sudan and more next year. How are we going to keep bringing people in if we can't house them, we can't feed them, we can't care for these people, and we're bringing in so many each year? It's only adding to this homeless crisis when the government brings in 8,000 new people and just forgets about them in a couple months. Look, chronic homelessness. I can't stress this enough. What are we doing as a country? Ms. Jones.
Ms. Jones.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Oliphant.
Madame Bendayan.
Madame Bendayan.
Monsieur Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Mr. Fragiscatos.
Mr. Fragiscatos.
Mr. Biddle.
Mr. Biddle.
Mr. Vancouverden.
Mr. Vancouverden.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Baptiste.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Mr. Kuzmarchak.
Mr. Kuzmarchak.
Ms. Dillon.
Ms. Dillon.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Nakfi.
Mr. Nakfi.
Mr. Cedar Brampton East.
Mr. Cedar Brampton East.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Souza.
Mr. Souza.
Mr. Dogood.
Mr. Dogood.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Oh Kellaway. man, our country just on the world stage becoming more and more of a joke. Week by week, the political theater just continues. The soap opera of Canada continues.
Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McKinnon, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Rabillard.
Mr. Robillard.
Madame Shanahan.
Madame Shanahan.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Ms. Hefner.
Ms. Hefner.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Ms. Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Baines.
Mr. Baines.
Ms. Bradford.
Ms. Bradford.
Mr. Chahal.
Mr. Chahal.
Madame Chatel.
Madame Chatel.
Madame Diab.
Madame Diab.
Mr. Hanley.
Mr. Hanley.
Ms. Kayabaga.
Ms. Kayabaga.
Mr. McDonald Malpeck.
Mr. McDonald Malpeck.
Ms. Taylor Roy.
Ms. Taylor Roy.
Ms. Thompson.
Ms. Thompson. All those opposed to the motion will please rise.
Not one
The House
person.
will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.
Okay, electronic voting period is coming up, so they play some copyright music here, which I cannot put on the stream. Or are they not going to play any music this time around? Oh no, there it is. Okay. Canada is the biggest joke in the UK. The laugh of the world. Yeah, the UK is... I am thankful to not be living over there, to say the least. Places like the UK or Germany or just any of those close together countries over in Europe, they're starting to you're starting to see a really big change. Let's just say that. I gotta be careful with what I say on YouTube. As much as I'm all for freedom of speech, YouTube at times is not, and they like to slam you down if possible, if you know what I mean. Fergus is a joke, absolutely agree. I do believe we need a new Speaker of the House. It's just a matter of is the evil we know better or worse than the evil we don't know? Is somebody gonna come in as new Speaker of the House and simply be worse than Greg? And Greg is already, well, we already know a lot about Greg as Speaker of the House now, don't we? Good Lord. I wonder when Trudeau is going to make his appearance back to the House of Commons. He has been gone for the entire week. This big scandal coming out of left field, and Trudeau running as far away and as fast away as he can. He wants nothing to do with his own corruption, with his own issues. He likes throwing that one chick under the bus quite often, I must say. What's her name? Karina or whatever. She gets thrown under the bus quite a bit by Trudeau. And it's funny, you know, the Liberal government's always talking about how they're for women and they care about women's rights and all of this, and they care about women's jobs and positions, but they keep tossing what I would assume is one of the more higher paid officials on the Liberal government under the bus. Pretty fucking funny. Good old JT in the flesh, not showing up to his own job. People thrown under the bus are usually driving the problem. They're at least part of it, that's for sure. I was surprised to see Jagmeet today. He was missing in action for the past few days. That's for sure. I guess everybody is unanimously voting yes on this one. There wasn't one individual who thought, no, I'm not going to stand for this. I have friends in Germany. They are not able to heat their house as their energy costs have gone crazy. Energy costs. I was thinking just terrible immigration over there. Rampant crime. Like, it's just the UK, Germany. They're not looking too hot now. That's for sure. They're not looking too good. Isn't that how most corporations word? Talking mat leave. I don't even know at this point. I don't even know. I'm just a guy on the internet with a microphone. And I thank all of you for joining me for question period here today. as it wraps up. I don't know if they're going to do any big things after this vote or not, so we'll see what happens here, and then we will continue on with our days. I kind of want to cover the BC debate from last night. I talked about it briefly earlier in the stream. I don't know if I'm actually going to do it, because it would be a rewatch. It wouldn't be live. It was something that happened last night. I think it took roughly 2 hours, 2.5 hours for them to do so. I also don't live in BC. I don't know if there's anybody here in BC that would be interested in that, but it happened last night if you are. Was Jagmeet drunk again? Or did he talk? Yeah, he did. He did speak today. He didn't have much to say, but he did. Whole of Canada wants Trudeau and Jagmeet government to go for good. See, that's what you would think, but there is, for some reason, this weird pocket of liberals in the very popular cities like Toronto and even out east. There's a lot of Trudeau support out east, which I find kind of weird because I think they have been treating the fisheries quite poorly, but I would have to look more into that. No, thank you. Before I found your channel a week or two ago or whatever, I was watching CPAC alone because the government is afraid of the public. Yeah, the CPAC channel doesn't even put out the chat. They hide their chat. And I'm surprised you haven't found other channels on here. There's a few other YouTube channels that cover our question period. I was about to call it house period. They cover question period. They cover all things Canada politics. I don't know why the house is muted right now. Greg is talking about something, and we're not hearing it. Okay, I guess we don't get to hear what they talked about.
Table will now
Never mind, I'm a fucking idiot. It was muted the whole time.
I declare the motion carried.
Je désire informer la Chambre.
I wish to inform the House that because of the deferred recorded division, government orders will be extended by 12 minutes.
Government orders are being extended by 12 minutes.
I wish to inform the House that the volume of earpieces will now be reset. Members using the earpiece at this time will have to readjust the volume. Et je désire informer...
I wish to inform the House that the volume of the earpieces will now be reset.
Sub to your channel, you are speaking the truth. Thank you very much. Like I said, if you guys are new, make sure you do hit that like button, hit that sub button. I don't claim to be the all-seeing eye or the truth speaker. I am just some guy on the internet. I'm just an average Canadian, like most of us are.
I have
Just an average Canadian who is, quite frankly, done with the bullshit.
That it has adopted the following bill for the House's assent. Bill S-250, an act to amend the criminal code.
Oh yeah, a lot of those political channels, the larger ones, I'll say, the chats go a mile a minute. They are just loaded with people arguing 24/7.
An act to amend the criminal code sterilization procedures. I wish to return to the point of order raised yesterday after oral questions by the member for Kelowna Lake Country. In her intervention, the member alleged that the member for Cambridge had used language that was unparliamentary toward her.
AKA the member called her a bitch. That's apparently what it was over.
As I had not heard anything like this at that time, I endeavored to review the matter and check if anything could be heard on the video or included in the official debates. After reviewing these records, I can confirm that nothing was found and that these words are not part of the records. As is the case at times, long-established tradition dictates that I should take members at their word. Accordingly, this is what I will do in this instance. Now, all that is left for the chair to do is to ask all members, as I have done so time and time again, to avoid speaking and shouting at each other from across the floor. This will help keep the exchanges civil and dignified. I thank all members for their attention. Orders of the day. Excuse me, routine business.
Well, I don't know if he thinks he's God, but I will say this. A week or so ago, like, the House of Commons got out of control numerous times, and he was not able to control it or bring it back down. So I think he got into some serious trouble. I think he got into some serious shit. Somebody gave him the smackdown behind the scenes because he hasn't been putting up with literally anything anymore. Like, he's been pretty stern with his speaking now. Anyway, this is just routine proceedings. I think I'm going to call it here. Thank you all for joining me for question period. I will be live tomorrow for question period, roughly the same time. Actually, before I leave, I want to play one video from the Pierre Polyev channel one more time. It was a video I played earlier, and you know, this shit's got me quite heated up that we have people in Canada that are openly chanting death to Canada and burning our flag with no repercussion at all. So I'm going to play this video one more time, and then I'm going to get out of here.
And yes, we are Hezbollah and we are Hamas.
There's nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas.
Samadoun, a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel advocacy group.
These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine and fighting for its liberation.
That's Samadoun co-founder and international coordinator Charlotte Cates. Samadoun, which means steadfast in Arabic, is banned in Germany and Israel for its vocal support of designated terror groups.
Most of what we do is kind of the activism that you see people do every day in their communities.
We stand with the Palestinian resistance and their heroic and brave action on October 7th. And they said, long live October 7th!
Dude, our government is failing on so many levels right now. It is unbelievable what we are currently seeing in today's day and age. But anyway, that is going to do it for today's stream. I will see you guys tomorrow for question period. Have a great rest of your day or night, wherever you are. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. And once again, I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for joining me.
We see the fascist newspaper saying we are here to celebrate the 7th of October. Well, yes, we are here to celebrate the 7th of October.
What do you say to those individuals who were at a concert that did not have a weapon? Was it heroic for that action to take place?
I do think it is heroic.
Photos online show Cates, who has endorsed several groups Canada considers to be terrorist organizations, accepted a Human Rights Award on August 4th from the Iranian government.